Before the video starts, I'd like to say that the awesome artwork for the thumbnail was created by Lady Goat. I'll leave a link to her Twitter page in the description. Metal Gear 1 and 2 were fun experimental games that released in the 80s and 90s. They had a unique gameplay structure that hadn't really been seen before. In most games back then, the objective was to engage with the enemies directly. Metal Gear flipped that and instead made the objective of the game to avoid enemies whilst moving to the next area. It was unique, challenging, and most of all, very fun. Metal Gear 2 also expanded the mechanics and gave more depth to the story and characters. Director Hideo Kojima would begin work on a Metal Gear 3, but it would be 8 years before another entry in the series would be seen. But when it did come back, it came back stronger than ever. Metal Gear Solid released to overwhelming acclaim and sales. The game revolutionized storytelling as well as game design for both action games and stealth games. Every stealth game released after Metal Gear Solid owes its existence to this game's success. Metal Gear Solid was also the starting point of the franchise for most people, despite the series existing for 11 years. The name Solid has two meanings. First of all, the main character is named Solid Snake, and second off, it was also the first 3D game in the series, and so solid is a reference to solid shapes that occupy the environment. The popularity of this game pretty much rebirthed the entire franchise, and Metal Gear is still one of the best-selling gaming franchises of all time. The effects of this game is still being felt today. Many people still consider this game to be one of the best video games ever made. But it has been over 20 years since Metal Gear Solid released, and the gaming landscape has changed a lot since 1998. That year also saw other industry-defining titles such as Resident Evil 2, Half-Life, Ocarina of Time, StarCraft, and many other titles that had a major influence on the industry moving forward. So what made Metal Gear Solid so unique? Why did it stand out from every other release at the time? And is it still worth playing decades later? Well, the only way to figure that out is to revisit Shadow Moses. Right off the bat, if you play the two previous games, you can see some similarities. A lot of Metal Gear Solid's core mechanics and design are lifted straight from Metal Gear 2. The games even have similar scenarios like running upstairs while shooting enemies, or a key that changes shape depending on temperature. The way Snake moves around is also very similar. Snake can run around, crouch behind objects, or go prone and crawl under objects. The way you collect items and explore the environment and progress through the game is also very similar. Even the level up system works the same as Metal Gear 2, where Snake levels up after each boss. Even the cardboard box from the first two games is back. Now, this may sound very iterative of Metal Gear 2, and it kind of is, but Metal Gear Solid isn't just Metal Gear 2 in 3D. There is a lot of unique stuff in this game. First of all, the 3D perspective adds a lot to the game. You can now view the world in first-person view. This helps identify things that normally can't be seen due to the fixed camera angles. Plus, this can help the player get their bearings if they're struggling to identify the environment. However, you can't move or use weapons whilst in first person like in later games. In this game, its utility is purely for the player awareness of the environment. Plus, when you get close to a wall corner, the camera will adjust to show you around the corner. Snake also has a scope that allows you to zoom in and identify enemies, an evolution of the binoculars. The way weapons work is different now too. In the first two games, they were projectile based, whereas most of the firearms in this game are hit scan. Snake can also lock onto enemies with the SOCOM pistol, and it has a laser so you can see exactly where he is going to shoot. This works for both stealth and action sequences, since you don't have to worry about bullets missing. The only projectile-based weapons are rocket launchers. I think this change also helps with pacing, as taking out guards is now much quicker. Another addition is that the minimap now shows the field of view of the guards, making it easier to understand how to avoid them. In Metal Gear 2, it was often hard to understand the field of view of enemies, so I appreciate this addition. With security cameras, you can now use chaff grenades to disrupt them, but it also disrupts your radar, so there is a slight downside to doing it. It makes getting past them less tedious and gives the player more options beyond just waiting for sightlines to change. Though the game does give you a lot of chaff grenades, so it is really easy to abuse this method. Keycards are much less annoying in this game. In Metal Gear 1 you had to carry like 7 keycards at once. In Metal Gear 2 you have 3 keycards that had different levels. But in this game you only have to carry 1 keycard that keeps getting upgraded. There are a lot of new additions to the gameplay, but what Metal Gear Solid does most is refine and perfect the formula the first 2 games established. What makes Metal Gear's formula so fun is that you start off the game with nothing, but over the course of the game you acquire new weapons and equipment that give you more options on how to sneak past enemies and progress through the levels. And almost every level has multiple ways to progress. For example, this open field has claymores. The safest way to progress is to go prone. If you crawl over claymores, then Snake picks them up and they don't explode. But if you picked up the thermal goggles earlier, then you can see the locations of them to get through much faster, and so you don't have to crawl through them. Or this cave section. It's hard to see in here, but if you picked up the night vision goggles earlier, then this section becomes much easier. The game rewards exploration by allowing the player to get through sections easier. Heck, for some of the action sequences later in the game, you can pick up body armor, which allows for a more run and gun style during these sections. You could sneak around corners whilst taking out guards, or you could sneak through in plain sight with a cardboard box. You could run through an area whilst gunning guards down, getting to the exit, or you could lay down explosives to take guards out or cause a distraction to lure them away. There are a lot of ways to play through each encounter, and the game has plenty of replay value, as doing different things on each playthrough and beating the game on different difficulties unlocks different items and weapons you can use when replaying the game. The game is also very well balanced. Enemies can be taken out easily, but if you're too careless, they can knock you down and kill you. I played on normal, and the damage I took always felt fair, and anytime I took damage, it was because I made a mistake and it could have been avoided. Whenever I got detected, it was because I was careless. It was never the game doing something stupid or unfair. The only somewhat unfair part is the Sniper Wolf boss, which I will talk about later. But other than that, Metal Gear Solid is perfect in terms of difficulty balance. Progression is really well handled too. In the first 2 games, it's not always clear where to go or what to do. In Metal Gear Solid, it's always clear, making it fun to progress and not tedious. The overall gameplay structure of Metal Gear Solid is damn near flawless. It's really fun to strategize on how to get around each encounter and study guard routes and gaps where you can get through and take them down. Plus, it's fun to explore and find new items, and the player is rewarded for doing so. There are also some scripted sequences, like said before, and these are really fun and memorable, like having to fight invisible enemies in an elevator, or rappelling down the side of a tower whilst being shot at, or the escape sequence at the end. These are all very fun and help give variety from the usual gameplay structure. But probably my favourite part of the game is the boss fights. Ocelot has you running around in a circle, shooting at each other. It's a very simplistic boss fight, but it's trying to teach you the mechanics of how to fight bosses in this game, like learning when to avoid attacks and learning when to deal damage. Both of you will shoot at each other and will look for windows when the other can be attacked. It's very simplistic, but it's engaging enough, and it works well as the first boss. The tank fight with Vulcan Raven isn't too engaging. It's hard for the tank to hit you, and you just throw 3 grenades into the tank and then it's done. It's not really challenging, and it lacks the personality of other boss fights in the game. The Cyborg Ninja fight prevents the use of firearms, and the boss has different stages. At first you need to wait for the opportunity to attack. The best way is to bait him into attacks, leaving him open. Then he uses his camo and you have to find him before he finds you. And then for phase 3 he will bait you into attacks before changing position. The multiple phases you have to adapt to keep the fight engaging throughout, and the lack of firearm use switches up the pace from the usual gameplay structure. It's not exactly a challenging boss, but it is entertaining enough, and it doesn't get boring. Psycho Mantis is one of the most unique boss fights in gaming. He reads your mind and can predict every move you do and can dodge it. The only way to beat him is to plug in another controller or change the input so he can't read your mind. But even ignoring that gimmick, his moveset is dynamic and fun to play around with. The boss would still be great even without the fourth wall break, it would just be less unique and memorable. Though the issue is that there's no real way to figure out how to beat him on your own. Colonel Campbell just tells you outright how to do it. There's no real hints or really any clues you can use to beat the boss by yourself, and I wish there was. Sniper Wolf is fun, but she can also be a bit annoying whenever she shoots you, as you get massively thrown off target and have to readjust, and she can rapid fire and kill you, which can be tedious. Plus, aiming for the sniper is made harder by Snake's shaky hands. It's already hard enough aiming with a PS1 controller, there's no need to make it more tedious. The Hind D fight is pretty good. You run around avoiding its attacks and looking for opportunities when you can do damage. The only issue I have with this is that there's no real evolution with it, you just keep doing the same method until it dies, but it is engaging enough and doesn't go on for too long. Vulcan Raven is one of my favourite fights in the game. You have to avoid his sightlines, since he can shoot down rockets and can kill you quickly if he sees you. You need to attack him when he's not looking. You can use directional rockets, or lay traps for him, or go from behind. It's a very fun and engaging fight. Metal Gear Rex has a cool scale and multiple ways to avoid attacks. Chaff grenades mess up the targeting system. If you get too close, then Rex has a laser to hit you, missiles that you need to dodge, and a machine gun. It's a fun back and forth between dodging the attacks and shooting Rex. And then there is the final fight with Liquid, where you need to adapt to his attacks, bait attacks, and learn when to go in and dish out damage and back out to avoid damage. It is very simplistic, but he does more damage than you do, and because of that it's easy to die, and if you get hit, then it's a pretty big punishment. So Metal Gear Solid has 7 good boss fights and 2 okay boss fights. The variety of bosses in this game is really good. If I did have any criticisms, the trap floors are stupid. You can run past them and be fine, but if you want to take a slower approach, then get punished. You can run and shoot at the same time, but the game never tells you that. Normally holding the fire button and moving just changes the direction Snake aims, but if you hold prone, then Snake moves. The game never tells you this, and this section is annoying unless you do it. Why couldn't Campbell just tell you about this? Another thing is that I think having to select the card to open doors is really stupid. Why can't the doors just open whenever I walk next to a door with the current card level? So for example, if I have a card level that is level 3, any level 1, 2 or 3 doors I walk next to will open automatically. It's a minor complaint, but it would cut down on having to constantly switch through items. Also, despite how much I love the story in this game, you spend more time watching cutscenes and listening to codec conversations than actually playing the game. Even if it is Metal Gear, it's still a criticism. I will criticize any game for doing this. My biggest issue with the game is how underutilized some of the mechanics are. People have calculated that there are only 23 guards in the entire game to experiment stealth with. Now, granted they do respawn, but still, that's a very low number, considering that the main selling point of this game is stealth. During the VR missions of the game, which are pretty much the tutorial levels, the game tells you mechanics like watching out for searchlights or leaving footprints in snow, yet there is only one location in the entire game where both of these mechanics are used, and it's at the very beginning. It also teaches you about floor surfaces that can be noisy, but they're barely in the game. There's only a handful of times where walking on a certain surface will cause more noise. There's also the fact that most of the equipment in your inventory isn't really ever needed, and most of them are very much novelty items. I'm not lying, you could get through most of the game without ever using most of the equipment or weapons. Plus, the game later on has a lot of action set pieces and backtracking. I don't mind backtracking in games, as long as there is something new to do in the old areas, but Metal Gear Solid just has you revisit locations to arbitrarily make the game longer. The new tools you obtain do make playing the areas a bit different and a bit more fun, but at the same time it's still the same locations and you go through them a lot. The worst part is the key card that you need to insert 3 times and go to different locations to heat it up or cool it down. This adds nothing to the game and just slows the pace down. It was fine in Metal Gear 2 back in 1990, but in Metal Gear Solid doesn't really work when the story pacing is grinded to a halt because of this. There's also a section of the game where you need to go all the way back to the beginning to get a sniper, and if you try and get it earlier in the game, Meryl won't let you, so you can't even be smart about it. Speaking of Meryl, this cutscene right here is pointless.
This place is mine. I'll take point again. Stay back, okay?
But the radar isn't working. And since we can't use the mine detector either...
Leave it to me. So, what do you think?
I wish the game didn't reuse locations so much and utilized more of its mechanics and encouraged the player to use the equipment in creative ways, like sticking C4 to a guard. I didn't find out you could do that until making this video, and I've been playing this game for years. Other than that, I'd say Metal Gear Solid's gameplay still holds up overall. Despite being a game from 1998, it doesn't feel dated very much at all. The gameplay mechanics are still really well refined, the formula for progression and exploration still works amazingly well, and the bosses are great. Gameplay-wise, it's a near-perfect game, and one I always love going back to. I'll never get tired of sneaking around enemies in a cardboard box, or taking out enemies in tactical ways, or fighting Metal Gear Rex. It's a blast from beginning to end, and is really well paced. The game knows when to slow down and amp up at all the right moments. Any criticisms I have with this game are overall very minor and negated by the sheer awesomeness and well-crafted nature of the game. And what is cool is that this game is still very unique decades later. The series later went on to expand or change the formula while still keeping Metal Gear's iconic gameplay. And stealth games like Splinter Cell that were inspired by Metal Gear Solid would have an entirely different gameplay structure itself. There really isn't anything else in the gaming world like Metal Gear Solid. It's still just as unique and engaging now as it was back in 1998, and it's impossible to explain how much I love this game. Metal Gear Solid's gameplay is well designed, engaging, and timeless. What Metal Gear Solid is also known for is its contribution to storytelling in gaming. Games with stories existed before Metal Gear Solid, and even games with good stories like System Shock existed before Metal Gear Solid. But MGS is one of the first games, along with Half-Life, that truly showed the potential for games as a storytelling medium. But while MGS was revolutionary, is the story still worth experiencing all these years later? To start off, Metal Gear Solid has a very simple premise. You play as the legendary Solid Snake, and are tasked with infiltrating Shadow Moses, a secret base in Alaska, to stop terrorists from launching a nuke. There are two main things that make Metal Gear Solid's story work: the depth and the characters. To this day, I think MGS1 has the best lineup of characters in the series. Solid Snake has become an icon in gaming, and for a good reason. He's one of the most entertaining main characters of all time.
Nice to meet you, Snake. It's an honor to speak to a living legend like yourself. What's wrong?
Nothing. I just didn't expect a world-class designer of military technology to be so... cute.
You're just flattering me.
No, I'm serious. Well, I know I won't be bored for the next 18 hours.
He has a lot of good one-liners that add levity to the game, and the performance by David Hayter is nothing short of legendary.
Finally, just the two of us. How are you feeling?
Not bad. Caught a nice nap on this revolving bed of yours. Too bad I was sleeping alone.
I'm glad to hear that.
He is also very courteous and respectful, even to his enemies. He works great as the main character because Snake isn't given all the details at once, and thus you're discovering all the secrets and mystery behind Shadow Moses at the same time he is. And all the emotions he's experiencing are the ones you experience. For example, when they use nanomachines to stop Snake from using firearms in a room with nuclear warheads. He's annoyed that they don't trust him, just as you would be. He's also a very conflicted character, as his objective is to stop a nuclear weapon designed for killing, yet as the game shows, he does at least take some enjoyment in war and killing people.
You enjoy all the killing. That's why.
What?
Are you denying it? Haven't you already killed most of my comrades?
That was...
I watched your face when you did it. It was filled with the joy of battle.
You're wrong.
There's a killer inside you.
He's saving lives, but by doing so is taking the lives of others. He does question Campbell a lot throughout the game, but he still goes along with whatever he's told for the most part. Just like how you do what you're told because you're the player. Snake is a reflection of the player in the game world, and while he's not exactly a deep character, he is more interesting and conflicted than most action game characters, even today, and it's why he's remained a beloved protagonist for so many years. Meryl is someone who looks up to Snake as a hero when he himself doesn't think himself as one.
I was a fan of Foxhound way back, when guys like you and my uncle were in it. None of that gene therapy like there is today. You guys were real heroes.
There are no heroes in war. All the heroes I know are either dead or in prison. One or the other.
But Snake, you're a hero, aren't you?
I'm just a man who's good at what he does. Killing. There's no winning or losing for a mercenary. The only winners in war are the people.
That's right, and you fight for the people.
I've never fought for anyone but myself. I've got no purpose in life, no ultimate goal.
She always wanted to become a soldier to give herself something to work with in life. She does function as the love interest for the game, but she has enough character development to stand out. The first time you meet her, she's afraid to use a gun until Snake yells at her to do so. But as the game progresses, she becomes more desensitized to it. She makes mistakes and views herself as inadequate, but it's because of her that Snake is able to get as far as he does. There is also an alternate non-canon ending where she dies, and you can see how much it torments Snake. Plus, if you stare at her weirdly or smack her, she reacts. Good character. Otacon is a weeaboo who got into science and created Metal Gear because of cool mechs in anime. He's naive, and he feels betrayed when he finds out that his creation is being used for nuclear war.
I used to think that I could use science to help mankind, but the one that wound up getting used was me. Using science to help mankind, it's just in the movies.
Both him and Snake share the similarity of not living a real life until now. Otacon helps Snake in whatever way he can to get through the game, and is regretful of how his innocent nature stopped him from viewing the pessimistic nature of the world. But it's in doing so that he finds a reason to live outside of the world he once knew.
No, I'm finished with science. I'm interested in human psychology now.
Sounds good.
The whole reason I got into science in the first place was because I was no good with people. I was scared of them. I was scared of life. I thought that I could never understand them because they're so illogical. But I finally learned how to like people.
Otacon may not be a skilled soldier, and he is a dork, but without him, Snake wouldn't win. And Otacon's optimism helps keep Snake's spirits up, and in turn your spirit up during the game. Even in the bad ending at the lowest point for both him and Snake, he shows that there is more to just winning and losing in life. Otacon brings a positive attitude to a game that in a lot of ways is the exact opposite, and he's welcome because of it. Plus his real name is Hal, and Snake's real name is David, which is a funny reference.
My real name is David, Otacon.
I'm Hal, Dave.
Oh, that's right. Hal. Hal and Dave. That's a good one. Maybe we should take a trip to Jupiter.
Grey Fox returns from the first two games as Cyborg and Ninja, and wants to battle Snake so he can feel alive again. Just like Snake, he feels only alive when in battle. He doesn't see any reason to live beyond that, and he feels regret over what he did to Naomi's parents.
Fox, why? What do you want from me?
I'm a prisoner of death. Only you can free me.
Fox, stay out of this. What about Naomi? She's hell-bent on taking revenge for you.
Naomi?
You're the only one who can stop her.
No, I can't.
Why?
Because I'm the one who killed her parents. I was young then, and couldn't bring myself to kill her too. I felt so bad that I decided to take her with me. I raised her like she was my own blood to soothe my guilty conscience.
He's lived with nothing but regret and guilt, and this was his last chance to do something meaningful with his life. And he did. He helped Snake defeat Metal Gear Rex and save the world. This also has more value if you played Metal Gear 2, since you'll be familiar with the friendship between both Snake and Fox. Fox represents what Snake will become if he doesn't find a reason to live, a soldier being used as a tool that doesn't have any purpose beyond fighting endless wars. The game also does a good job of humanizing minor characters such as Psycho Mantis, Sniper Wolf, and Vulcan Raven. Psycho Mantis is remembered for how he messes with your PlayStation and moves your controller and reads your memory card.
So, you like Suikoden? So, you like Azure Dreams? You like Castlevania, don't you? You enjoy role-playing games. I see that you enjoy Konami games.
But my favorite scene with him is the final one, where he uses his power to help Snake, and realizes that he could have used his power for good.
This is the first time I've ever used my power to help someone. It's strange. It feels kind of nice.
It's a very somber cutscene, but at least he finally fulfills what he could have done so long ago, at least in some way. Sniper Wolf doesn't view her death in a bad way, she views it as her being set free. Her being a sniper allowed her to have a better view of the world that she is now leaving. Plus it adds to Otacon's character. Earlier in the game, Otacon asks if love can bloom on a battlefield, which may seem out of place at the time, but given the context that he has an affection for Wolf, it makes sense. Otacon doesn't really know what love is because he's a shut-in and hasn't experienced life outside of the bubble he lives in, so seeing the only thing that he's been attached to in the outside world die makes him search for a new meaning in life. Vulcan Raven is the opposite. Instead of being set free, he views his death from a nature point of view. When he dies, ravens eat his remains, and from his perspective, he's returning to the world that created him. Revolver Ocelot is an undercover agent who is pretending to work for several different people in order to achieve Big Boss's dream. He loves being vulnerable in firefights and is sadistic when it comes to torture and interrogation. Even with his hand cut off, he is still a worthy adversary to Snake and is very intimidated.
How did you like that? Shall we go again?
Liquid Snake is the twin brother of Solid Snake, who were both created using Big Boss's DNA. Liquid wants his father's remains, as Big Boss's DNA was also used to create the soldiers you fight in the game, which poses an issue since their DNA can't adapt to new viruses, and thus they have the threat of dying off, and Liquid wants a cure, and he thinks his cure is in Big Boss's genes.
So that's why you're so obsessed with Big Boss. Some warped kind of love.
Love? It's hate! He always told me I was inferior, and now I'll have my revenge! You should understand me, brother. You killed our father with your own hands! You stole my chance for revenge! Now I'll finish the work that father began. I will surpass him! I will destroy him!
The final cutscenes with him are an enigma because there's like 10 different plot twists in the span of 5 minutes, and it can be hard to keep track of for the average player, but you always understand who he is and what he wants. The cast of characters in this game is awesome because they all have unique perspectives on life, death, love, and war, and they all have unique character arcs. It's part of why the narrative is still so engaging after all this time. Plus, the constant twists and turns the narrative takes get progressively more interesting. It turns out that the government injected Snake with a virus named Fox Dye that kills specific targets, and they sent him on this mission to kill all of Foxhound and retrieve Metal Gear Rex undamaged. But when it's destroyed, they decide to bomb the place. However, the story isn't perfect by any means. One thing that's always bothered me is the plot twist that Naomi was trying to kill Snake all along because he killed Grey Fox. It took her from being an interesting geneticist with a mysterious backstory to a generic revenge story.
Frank Yeager.
What?
He was a young soldier when he picked me up near the Zambezi River. I was half dead from starvation, and he shared his rations with me. Yes, Frank Jaeger. The man who you destroyed was my brother and my only family.
No.
I vowed revenge and joined Foxhound. I knew it was my best chance to meet you, and I prayed for the day that I would.
So, were your prayers answered?
Yes. I waited 2 long years.
To kill me? Is that all you cared about?
Yes. That's right.
Plus, there is the fact that Liquid wanted Snake to activate Metal Gear, and that they needed him to do so. So why does he try and kill Snake on so many occasions, even directly? There are also some scenes and dialogue that can be overdramatic or just out of place.
What's with these guys? It's like one of my Japanese animes.
But overall, the story still holds up and is still a really engaging experience. The theme of the game is finding something to live for. Snake, Meryl, and Otacon, at the beginning of the game, have no real goals in life beyond superficial ones. They just keep on treading on. But over the course of the game, they learn to move on from their past life and enjoy what they have in front of them. There is also the fact that this game covers real-world issues like nuclear war, things that still affect the world we live in today.
I understand, but why Metal Gear? The nuclear age ended with the turn of the millennium.
Oh, you're wrong. The threat of nuclear war isn't gone. In fact, it's greater than it's ever been. The amount of spent nuclear fuel and plutonium is increasing even today. Listen, have you ever seen a warehouse full of nuclear material?
No.
Drums and drums of nuclear waste stacked this high, as far as you can see, because there's still no real way to dispose of the stuff.
So they just close the lid and try to pretend like it'll go away?
Essentially, yes. And they're not even doing a good job of storing it. Many of the drums are corroded, with nuclear waste seeping out of them.
Unbelievable.
Most games back then wouldn't care enough to touch upon topics like this, so it's surprising that Metal Gear Solid did. Heck, even the previous 2 games did. Metal Gear really was ahead of its time. It's no surprise that this game had the effect it did on storytelling and gaming, and why it still continues to be beloved decades later. The soundtrack in this game is legendary. First of all, I love how the sneak-in theme from Metal Gear 1 has a new version in the VR missions. The sneak-in themes in this game do a perfect job of keeping you on edge whilst avoiding enemies. The alert theme is very iconic and very tense. The emotional moments hit harder due to the music. And the best is yet to come as one of my favourite pieces of music from any video game.
See
What else can I say? The music is amazing and works great with the gameplay and cutscenes. In conclusion, Metal Gear Solid is a masterpiece and a timeless classic. There are some gameplay features that should have been expanded upon and fleshed out more, and there are some plot points that are redundant, but as a complete package, there is nothing else like it, even in this series. Speaking of which, it's no wonder that the rest of this franchise exists because of this game. But even if this was the last game and Metal Gear remained a trilogy, it would have been a great send-off. I love this game to death, and I hope you're able to understand why this game means so much to me and many others. The unfortunate thing with this game and many other games in the series though is that there's really no perfect way to play them nowadays. You could play the original PS1 release if you still have a PS1, but then you have to deal with low resolution and the frame rate problems. You could play it on the PS3 Legacy Collection, which is better than the PS1 version, but the resolution still isn't what you'd want out of a game nowadays. Plus, not everyone has a PS1 or PS3 that they can easily just go back to and play the game on, and those consoles are somewhat expensive nowadays, and so is the game itself. You could emulate the game, which works fine for the most part, but there are some graphical glitches. The PC version of this game is overall the best version, but it is still missing some unique cutscenes like the Psycho Mantis ones, and it isn't 100% accurate to the original game. But if you're going to play this game, then the version on GOG is probably your best bet. Regardless, there is no denying that Metal Gear Solid is one of the greatest video games ever made, and will be beloved many decades from now.